Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the War and Peace podcast. I'm Jacob Homont.
And I'm Brett Lampley.
And today we're going to be talking about Europe.
Yeah, so we're going to start off. I'm going to be talking about Brexit. So, it's a huge thing happening in Europe right now. A deadline was extended to the end of January for a decision on Brexit. Right now, a lot of the problems have been started because of how, technically at the moment, Brexit is English law, and it is won the popular vote by 52%. So there is no legal way to abort Brexit right now. So there's a lot of controversy and a lot of talk about what's going on with this. So it's going to bring a lot of interesting change in the coming up year, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens because of it. And Jacob's going to talk about what might happen because of this.
Yes. So, with this, Scotland and Northern Ireland both want to stay in the EU because they believe it would better their countries within the Union. While England and Wales, I believe, do not want to stay in the EU, obviously. This could cause many problems, like Scotland declaring its independence from the United Kingdom, or Northern Ireland returning into Irish hands, which would be good for the Irish island, because since the 1800s, Irish nationalists have been fighting the British there to get the north part of their country out of British hands. With Scotland, there have been tensions lately over Brexit between England and the Scots, as, like I said, the Scots do not want to leave the EU because the EU has been providing economic subsidies and help to their country. Talking about what happened last week, Abu Bakr was killed himself along with 3 children in a U.S. raid on his compound. Brett's going to talk about how this could heavily impact the EU.
Yeah, speaking of the EU, this death of Abu Bakr is actually really turning up some ideas in the EU. So recently they have talked about how they're going to make their security vigilant, and there might be a threat of retaliation that happens in the EU because of the death of Abu Bakr. So they're fearing that there's going to be some uprising toward the EU because of tensions that have risen because of the instance. So they are preparing to make sure that their countries and their homeland is very secure, that no attacks like the Paris bombings or anything like that happen again when it comes to terrorist attacks. So a lot has been stirred up because of the death of him, and they're really preparing for something bad to happen. But, of course, it's a good thing that they're preparing right now, because even if it doesn't happen, it's good to have security. So I think what they're doing is something good. And hopefully nothing will happen. And hopefully, if anything does happen, it will be contained by the EU because of their actions that they've done before it happened. So Jacob's going to be talking about a German incident in Dresden. So if you want to take that over.
Of course. Earlier this week in Dresden, the Pegida, or the Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamization of the Occident, which is a German, well, it started out as a German, but it's now spreading to other European countries. It is a nationalist group of European people who are against the mass immigration of Muslims and Africans into the EU. They marched on Dresden, and the governor of Dresden, or the mayor of Dresden, called a Nazi Notstand, or a Nazi emergency, referencing these protesters to be members of the NPD, which is a far-right neo-Nazi party. The prejudice towards immigrants in the EU, and especially Germany lately, has risen, with many attacks on immigrants due to, or in retaliation to, their attacks on German citizens. Crime statistics show that immigrant suspects constitute of 2% of the population, while being 14.9% of suspects. And while also being 2% of the population, they are 15.9% of suspects in rape and sexual assault cases. A vast majority of Dresdeners are reported to be neither right-wing nor anti-democratic, although almost 14,000 people were in the march in Dresden. What do you think about this?
I think that it's definitely immigration is definitely a thing that is very hard for countries to handle. But when you have staggering numbers like this, of course, you have to be awakened that you know that you need to do something about this. So I'd say that the country shouldn't be like completely 100% harsh on it. But I do say that it is probably the best thing to do to try to regulate immigration. And that goes for about every country, but especially when you have problems like this, it's definitely a wake-up call that you need to be doing something about it. So I think that they need to start acting on it and making new policies to protect themselves from these things that happen.
In my opinion, I do believe that it's a time to cut down on immigration into Europe, because what I've been hearing and what I've been seeing is that most immigrants are not concerned with assimilating into the cultures of Europe. And this is a major problem because the people believe that if they are not assimilating into the same culture that they've been living in for hundreds or thousands of years, that they're not going to be any help to the country. They're taking welfare subsidies and they're taking welfare payments, help from the government. They're using all that for their own good, and they're not being helpful to the society and as a whole. These protests have been continuing, and I'm sure will continue until the governments of Europe come together and do something about immigration. They should use Poland and Hungary, which are the two countries who have the least terrorist attacks, because there are no immigrants in that country. There are little to none.
Yes, I agree with your statements 100%. There needs to be action taken into these instances.
Yeah. That's really all we have for today. Next episode, we're going to talk about stuff that will happen in the Americas regarding what could come from the elections, regional elections, national elections, or whatever. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm Jacob Homont.
And I'm Brett Lampley. And remember, kids, choose volleyball and not radical Islamic terrorism.